Welcome to Coffee Talk, where we dive into the world of personal finance, wellness, and everything in between. Today's guest is Rahkim Sabree. He's a financial therapist, author, speaker, and advocate. Hi, Rahkim. How are you today?
I am well. I'm well. How are you?
Great. I'm wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today to talk about what you do, financial therapy, and how you help people in the community and people all over the United States.
Absolutely.
How is financial therapy different from financial counseling or financial advising?
Great question. Financial therapy combines competencies from the mental health space, from the financial planning space, incorporating aspects of financial coaching to really address the emotional and behavioral aspects of personal finance. So, financial planning or advising is more so going to look at tactical approaches to money management or money behaviors, right? So, how do we teach people how to budget? How do we teach people how to save? Would fall in the coaching category. What does long-term planning look like by way of marriage or divorce or succession planning, right? In the
Mhm.
event of our eventual demise, what are we leaving behind for future generations? And so it's putting the pieces in place for people to realize their desired financial outcomes.
Mhm.
Whereas financial therapy kind of looks at what has happened to you in the past, or what are the experiences that you've navigated in the past that influence your behaviors, your attitudes, your beliefs around money today. And what are the things that we can do to help change your perspective, if necessary, on those attitudes, those beliefs, what you tell yourself about money, what money represents to you, how does that show up in your relationships, etc. So it's not as tactical in terms of the education piece or the planning piece, but certainly I believe a necessary part of the holistic picture.
Yes, it most certainly sounds like it to me. And I'm wondering, how did you get on this journey? Why did you go into financial therapy? And what's your story and how you developed this skill set and wanting to help others?
Yeah, so I started off in the coaching space.
Mm.
I was really adamant about not becoming a financial planner. Funny enough, I worked in the banking industry for a decade.
Mhm.
Left banking, decided I was going to do one-on-one coaching almost exclusively.
Okay.
And my big thing at that time was financial empowerment. So I wanted to draw a distinction between the phrase financial empowerment
Mhm.
and what was being kind of passed around as just generalized financial literacy. In the process of this journey, I realized that I was doing a lot of mindset work, like I was focusing on people's mindset and inadvertently focusing on the variables that show up in an individual's present day that come from their past experiences. I'm
Mhm.
also a very experience based practitioner. And so coming into the space of financial coaching and eventually financial therapy, was informed by my experiences with money, which some of which were painful. And so, what did the mindset shift for me look like in moving from an environment that was largely poverty driven or that influenced my aspirations and goals financially into a space where I can embrace abundance and I can aspire for things that I didn't have exposure to growing up? How do I translate that experience, that aha moment, that alignment to the clients that I work with? And so I started using the phrase financial trauma before I knew what it was or that it existed, and started to stumble down this rabbit hole that led me into financial psychology and ultimately discovering the Financial Therapy Association. Went off to one of their conferences, and I'm like, oh, these are my people. And so ever since then, it's been a wonderful ride.
Great that you're able to take your own personal experience and translate that into your life's work and your passion. And I'm wondering, what do you think about social media? And do you think that social media plays any part into people's mindset about maybe not being realistic with their money or striving for wealth that's unattainable? Or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe they're like thinking that they can never achieve that and then they feel bad about themselves. I'd love to hear your thoughts on social media and financial trauma and wellness.
So social media is not inherently good or evil. I think it's an amplifier of what we see and experience every day. Certainly, social media lowers the barrier to entry, if you will, to certain financial topics, financial products, even financial lifestyles. And so,
Mhm.
because of that, yes, it can amplify feelings of, I don't want to use the word competitiveness, but covetous feelings around what people's, how they're presenting and the lifestyle marketing that they're engaging in, and how that translates to the individual.
Mhm.
But on the other side of that, social media exposes people to, or can expose people to, a lifestyle or a reality that maybe they would not otherwise know exist. Traveling within the circles that they are born and raised and interact with, right? A lot of how we determine what is safe or what is unsafe, or how we discover what is pleasurable or unpleasurable, are based off of the interactions that we have with other people. Now, the danger with social media, or the danger that I like to focus on with social media, as a subset of a much larger issue,
Mhm.
is that because of the way that social media monetizes with advertising, um, with the sensationalism, right? We get the little bite-sized pieces.
Yep.
What that does for us on a nervous system level, right, in terms of regulation and dysregulation, is keeps us in a dysregulated state, right?
Mm.
So this is a little bit outside of kind of the straight lines of financial therapy, but when we look at the neuroscience of dopamine and dopamine dependence, right? Social media is constantly providing us with that dopamine fix, right? We get the likes, we get the shares, we get the comments. We watch the feel good clips. We watch the sometimes it's referred to as trauma porn, people fighting, people arguing, all of the things. And we have these, reactions that exist in our body that have become so normalized that many
Mhm.
times we don't recognize what's happening. A dysregulated person is a profitable one, because in experiencing that dysregulation, we are going to seek safety, right? That is our brain's primary function. And in seeking safety, we may make associations based off of the advertising that we're consuming with
Mm.
safety and the products and services that are being shown on our feed. And so, of course, that's going to have an impact on our spending behavior. That's going to have an impact on our saving or lack of saving. That's going
Mhm.
to have an impact on how we perceive investing. So many people approach investing through a lens that is more consistent with gambling than it is from an educational perspective. And that's because of sensationalism, right? What is the company? Robinhood
Yep.
was in trouble, like, recently, because of the gamifying aspect of the platform that gives you the bells, whistles, ding, ding, dings that you would experience when you go to a casino and you play slots, right? And so people are investing into products, services, asset classes. You talk about the crypto craze, we talk about day trading, stocks, all of these things. They're looking for these bite-sized pieces of information to satisfy a dysregulated state, or maybe they've experienced financial hardship, or maybe they've experienced poverty and they're desperately looking for a way to escape. And who better to capitalize on that than individuals who are leveraging marketing technology to say, hey, you're broken, here's the fix.
Let me ask you, just because we're talking the internet and betting, are you seeing any issues with the sports betting craze now with young people? I'm reading a lot about primarily young males really getting hooked into this daily sports betting and betting on, crazy things, not even sports, betting on outcomes of television shows, other events, political events. So I'm just wondering, have you had to deal with any of that in your counseling and your therapy?
I haven't directly, but it is something that I'm peripherally aware of because
Mm,
there are colleagues of mine who focus on that exclusively.
okay.
And then even in my social life, right, there are individuals within my age group who this is all the rave, right? So I have not personally engaged in sports betting, but certainly within my friend groups, I've heard about the incentives that these companies offer, to get you involved, right? They might give you, you put $10 in, they give you $200 of betting money, right? And that's just a random example. Like that's not exactly what the incentive is, but
Right.
it is seen all over social media. It's become mainstream. In certain states it's legal, in certain states it's not legal, and I think that's really one of the bigger protections that we have here. But
Mhm.
I anticipate over the years to come that it's going to become a bigger problem as people, like I said, are dysregulated. They're going to look for a way to regulate, and dysregulated people are a profitable one.
Now, we have the emotional and psychological factors that play into financial decisions on a daily basis. So, how do you deal with that in the financial therapy world? And do you find that people with financial trauma kind of have a different psychological reaction to financial decision making?
There's a culture of within financial education spaces, shame, blame, guilt, right? The individual is at fault. And so
Mhm.
we often talk about financial education through a lens of discipline, or rather financial decision making through a lens of discipline and education. We don't talk about it so much through a lens of this idea of dysregulation, or this idea of trauma, or this idea of individuals existing in a survival mode and looking for ways to escape. So when we talk about the emotional aspects of financial decision making and the behavioral aspects of financial decision making, a lot of times the just giving people the language to describe what they're experiencing is like the biggest first step that they can take,
Mhm.
because they're like, oh wait, like it's not just me that's
Is it
going
that
through this.
aha moment kind of?
Absolutely. So when you can name what it is that you're going through, then you can start to I don't want to sound super metaphysical, but like start to have power over it rather than allow it to have power over you.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times people are just going through the motions, right?
Mhm.
They're doing what they have to do to survive. And so I shared this recently with a colleague. I've been working on removing the phrasing bad financial decision from my vocabulary,
Oh,
because I don't believe that anybody intentionally makes a bad financial decision.
right.
I think that people make the best decision for them in that moment. And then when they look back on it, they're like, well, it seems like a good idea at the time. I can, from a place of wisdom now, recognize that it wasn't. But the big obstacle, if you will, that exists in moving from that place of acknowledgement that I don't like the way that this situation turned out, or I don't like how I engaged in that particular scenario financially, is the shame piece, is the guilt piece, because it's like, oh, I should have known better, or oh, I should have done better. So when we have a perceived threat that is experienced through a financial lens, and we're socialized not to acknowledge the financial lens in anticipating or addressing what these threats look like, our body is going to react regardless, because again, the brain is trying to protect you, right? And so when the brain enlists the help of the rest of your body through increased cortisol, through cortisol is a stress hormone,
Mhm.
through dopamine dependence, through adrenaline. And adrenaline can tie into how our stress responses may show up as anxiety, may show up as where we store stress in our body.
Mhm.
We're constantly in this state of maybe vigilance or avoidance, trying to get away from the threat or the discomfort associated with financial circumstances. It creates this cycle that, again, flies under the radar. So, when working with individuals and organizations around bringing trauma informed and trauma responsive education to the financial arena, one of the first things that I do is name the source of trauma. So, I've identified 6 sources of financial trauma, and then talk about exactly what I just shared with you. What is happening in your brain and your body when
Mhm.
you are perceiving a threat? How do we draw parallels between the way that our evolutionary responses related to fight, flight, freeze, fawn show up in our financial behaviors? And then how can we tie our awareness of our evolutionary responses into the the financial education curriculums that are often shared, right? And say, okay, these are the goals that I have. These are the values that I have. This is how I intend on moving forward. These are the roadblocks that I can anticipate in moving forward, the discomfort, and being able to name, where do I feel discomfort in my body? That's a question that I ask. Do you feel safe in your body when we talk about finances? Where do you feel money in your body? And help people to start maneuvering through that
Mhm.
discomfort.
Can I
So
ask you
that,
where people normally, how do they respond to that? Like, where do people normally feel that trauma in their body?
well, I could talk for myself specifically. Any kind of stress in my
Mhm.
body, I feel in my upper back and my shoulders.
Okay.
Some people will feel it in the pit of their stomach, right? So if you think
Mhm.
about somebody who woke up in the middle of the night, cold sweat because they were stressed stressed about how they're going to pay their mortgage, right? You're going to feel that
Right.
in the pit of your stomach. And so a
Mhm.
lot of the same places that you would feel generalized anxiety or stress or trauma in your body are the places that it would exist through a financial lens.
Mhm.
But we just have to connect the financial lens
Right.
to this
Right.
science.
Yeah, I will tell you, anytime I've had any sort of debt or financial upset, I literally get like sick to my stomach. It's a real like feeling. So I understand that 100%.
The vagus nerve, which
Mhm.
comprises of the brainstem, the lungs, the throat, the stomach, and some other organs that exist in the in between. All of these work together to not only determine safety or a danger, but also to help us to co-regulate with other people. So when we look to our community to determine whether or not we're in a safe environment,
Mhm.
that's something that the vagus nerve is going to engage. So as you say, you feel sick to your stomach. Our stomach oftentimes is described as like our second brain.
Right.
Our stomach will act as a compass and letting us
Mhm.
know, hey, this situation is a dangerous one, or at least that's how your body feels.
Right.
You have to go in and regulate through what's referred to as top-down regulation, which is
Mhm.
how do I change my mind around what this looks like? So this is
Right.
where cognitive behavioral theory will come in. How do we shift cognitive distortions rather, and say I am safe despite feeling like I'm unsafe? Or bottom-up regulation, which involves bringing your body into harmony and trying to get into a regulated state by doing somatic activities
Mhm.
like breath work.
I was just going to ask if you work with people doing breath work or tapping or other sort of like modes of, regulating your system.
Absolutely, I encourage it. I'm not a somatic practitioner,
Mhm.
in terms of like uh, specified knowledge, right? Like I haven't gone through any programs to become a certified somatic practitioner,
Mhm.
but I do believe that somatic practices are an absolute must in addressing financial trauma.
And let's just define somatic for the audience, just in case people aren't familiar with it.
So somatic is of the body, right? So it's incorporating the body and movement.
Mhm.
So yoga could be a somatic practice. Martial arts could be a somatic practice. Dancing, massage. I have a friend who practices Reiki. Reiki
Mhm.
is an energetic practice that has a somatic impact. Breath work, tapping, yawning. So if you ever pay attention to going throughout the day, if you experience a stressful day, you might just randomly go, ah. And that happens to me regularly, and I didn't realize until I started studying financial trauma that I was regulating myself by breathing.
Breathing.
And so if we can be intentional about our breathing, when
Mhm.
we breathe, how deep we breathe, where we hold it, these practices are practices that are innate to animals broadly, but to us. And so we just have to re-engage with these practices and understand that our body is telling us something's going on and
Something's
we need to
wrong.
pay attention.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the financial trauma situations that you've encountered? I feel like when you share stories of other people, um, our audience will connect with it. So I was just wondering, maybe like three tiers, an extreme, a middle of the road, and maybe a trauma that the person wasn't aware of and didn't think was a big deal, but actually was a blocker?
So this is one category, but two different occurrences. Generational trauma is usually attributed to the cultural habits, beliefs, and ideas around money that are passed down from generation to generation. And of course, they're going to have a negative connotations. But the genetic side of it is really fascinating because there is an emerging field of study called epigenetics
Mhm.
that trauma researchers have identified that trauma or stress can influence how genes are expressed in the current generation and future generations. And so I thought that was really fascinating because trauma in general and financial trauma specifically, especially if you are in a poverty environment or you've experienced sustained poverty, which many families do experience generations of poverty, can have an impact on the way that your genes are expressed and can have an impact on the way that the genes of future generations are expressed. So let's say you grow up never experiencing financial hardship and you're making great money, you can still have impacted effects from your parents or your grandparents' experiences. So that's one source.
Mhm.
Vicarious or observed is the second source. So that's what I'm looking at, what I'm seeing. If my parents are arguing about money, even the way that we're socialized around money when it comes to acknowledging homeless people, or really we're socialized not to acknowledge homeless people.
Right.
But there's a lot of negative associations with individuals that don't have money. And so if we see how people who don't have money are treated, we internally say, hey, I don't want to be treated that way. So I'm going to do whatever I can to not be in that situation
Right.
or to not look like I'm in that situation. So we talk about people who live above their means. I think this is
Mhm.
a big contributing factor because the desire to live above your means is not necessarily just a desire to show off. It's a desire to not be considered one of the undesirables.
It's very interesting and very interesting. And I feel like that's probably not that it wouldn't be true all over the world, but particularly in the United States. I feel like that would really resonate.
Absolutely. The third source of trauma, as I've identified it, is poverty or financial instability, which is the most often attributed source of financial trauma. So I think
Mhm.
that's pretty self-explanatory, right? Either it's a short stint of financial instability. I experienced a job loss, I experienced a repossession, I experienced bankruptcy, and now I have to navigate the consequences of that. Of
Mhm.
course, increased levels of stress, increased levels of anxiety as you're figuring out what that looks like. So you may not experience poverty, but you may be in a neighborhood or an environment that is impacted by poverty. How is that going to affect how you move through the neighborhood? How is
Mhm.
that going to affect how other people move through the neighborhood? What
Mhm.
kind of vigilance are you going to have around resources when it comes to navigating that space? There's also workplace and employment trauma. So this is
Oh,
one is probably, I think, super not acknowledged, because how do we associate the workplace as a place of trauma? But when we think about how many people are in jobs that they don't like, right? And they have to stay at these jobs that they don't like because they have to make a living. And so, what are the behaviors that they have to engage in order to continue to be successful in their role? And so there's what's referred to as fawning. There's a fawning response, which is more like a people pleasing response
okay.
that people engage in as a survival mechanism. Where I'll give you an example: if somebody gets kidnapped, right, and you are worried about
Mhm.
what is going to happen to me because I was just kidnapped, you might engage in practices where you're trying to appeal to the individual who kidnapped you's humanity. That's a phoning response, right?
Mhm.
You're going to do anything you can to be nice to this person so that this person is nice to you.
Mhm.
And so we look at that through a workplace and employment lens. If an individual is engaged in a job that maybe they don't like, or maybe they don't feel like they can get anything else, they don't feel like they can escape, they don't feel like they can climb the ladder, they're going to engage in that same kind of people pleasing behavior as a form of economic warfare. Like, I need to survive, so I'm going to do
Mhm.
whatever it is that I can. And so I like to look at that because on the flip side of that, what I've also noticed is that there's this huge pipeline of individuals who leave workplace to pursue entrepreneurship because they're running away from the trauma that they experienced in the workplace. The next one is institutional or systemic. So that speaks to the way that systems have been designed and who that benefits and who that does not benefit. Oftentimes, when I'm having the conversation around institutional and systemic trauma, I'm having conversations about classism and racism and what that looks like. And then the last one is family, societal, or religious. And I loop those all into the same category because there are familial expectations that exist that may be
Mhm.
informed by culture.
Mhm.
There are societal expectations that exist that may be informed by culture.
Mhm. Are we talking
And
like tiger mom issues? And that's kind of a reference from a while ago, but where
we're talking about the clash that exists
Mhm.
in particularly communities that come to America with a collectivist approach to money management with their
Mhm.
families and are faced with this idea of the values associated with capitalism and individualism as a result, right? I work with a client, she was East Asian, had no expectation of ever managing her own money because culturally she was to be married off and the man that she married was supposed to take care of all the finances.
Okay.
But she ended up coming to the United States, getting an education, working in the finance field, and now she's a high income earning woman who is battling with identity around the cultural values of where she comes from
Mhm.
and the culture of individualism that exists in America. She's very proud of what she's been able to accomplish financially, but also feeling conflicted in interacting with her family and what their expectations of her are as a result of cultural norms.
Do you find any difference in the different generations that maybe you counsel and then part, like Gen Z versus millennial, Gen X? Like, are there any generational differences that you've noticed?
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
I think the millennial and Gen Z populations are more open to the idea of therapy, more open
Mhm.
to the idea of healing through this lens than some of the previous generations.
Mhm.
Gen X and older might be more resistant because this is considered new thought, right? And so, particularly like the baby boomer generation, like why are we talking about feelings and money, right? Well, there's a lot of pointing the finger of like the
Yeah.
millennial populations that say you guys are lazy, you guys are entitled, you guys are spoiled. Why can't you guys do what we did? But
Mm.
there's lost context in the cost of living, the
Yeah.
ease of access to information,
Mhm. Mhm.
so many like
Right. Well,
economic
the
challenges.
housing, the housing crisis and then the
One
Great Recession right after, and them coming
100%.
up in their formidable years and in their 20s. So, yeah, I mean, a lot happened
And
regarding the
so
finances. Mhm.
the sources of trauma may look the same, but the impact of those sources of trauma on those generations, the older generations versus the newer generations, might be experienced differently.
Mhm.
And to your point, uh, millennials and forward have been hit with a barrage of financially disruptive experiences on a world level, right?
Mhm.
We talk about so many things. That 2008 housing
Right.
crisis. You talk about student loan crisis that is
Mhm.
coming to a head here now. Talk about the COVID slash recession, right? Because it was
Right.
I don't know if
Mhm.
one caused the other or they were happening concurrently, but now we're behind that, but we're really not. Like we're still feeling the effects of that,
Mhm.
and there's so much concern now around financial stability on a recession level with
Absolutely.
the changing pace of technology. When we look at AI and the concern that AI brings around whether or not my job is going to be here tomorrow, right? So there's a lot of things that
Mhm.
are happening as
Mhm.
house prices go up and up and up, and millennials are looking to buy, and they can't afford it.
Right, right. I just feel, yeah, very compassionate to everybody dealing with financial challenges right now because it's like so different from past generations and past decades. Like every decade has their issue, but I just feel like in the last 20, it has just been a barrage back to back. So it's, yeah, it's very, different footing for people emotionally to deal with, and emotion and finance are tied so closely together.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a lot of talk that I see on TikTok, on Instagram about money mindset, and negative money mindset, scarcity around that. So there's a big movement with like positive money mantras and abundance. What are your feelings on the scarcity mindset, and do you encounter that with people that you counsel? And how do you deal with that, or how do you help people through it?
My entry point into this space was focused on this idea of empowerment that really kind of encapsulated a lot of what you talk about, right? I believed very much in the law of attraction. I believe very much in, the positive affirmations and the vision boarding and, all the activities that are like a part of that category or movement, if you will. What I have learned over the years is that it's been sensationalized for one, and the science that connects those practices to practical outcomes is often understated, right? So there's an author whose work I studied in the process of developing a book that I wrote on financial trauma, named Dr. Joe Dispenza. Dr. Dispenza wrote the book. He wrote several books, but the book in particular that I want to speak about is titled "Becoming Supernatural." And so he's a neuroscientist
Mm-hmm.
who bridges neuroscience, quantum theory into creating new outcomes. And so he talks about epigenetics in his work as well. He also talks about this future self visualization and the use of affirmations to rewire your brain. So there's science that points to how affirmations can rewire your brain. Now, his formula for what this looks like is, stating the affirmations on a regular basis. So hearing yourself say whatever the reality is that you're looking to have as an outcome, and saying it as if it's already happened, right? So it's not like I wish this would happen. It's this is what's happened. But the piece that's missing in a lot of these conversations that he talks about super profoundly is you have to connect your frequency or vibration to
Mm-hmm.
that outcome as well by way of an emotional anchor. And so a lot of times he says the most powerful emotional anchors are gratitude and love. And so, as you are saying the outcome that you are looking to accomplish by way of affirmations, and you are visualizing what that looks like, what that feels like, what it means to be this person, you also have to connect to this emotional outlet or frequency that is either love and or gratitude. And so, Dr. Dispenza's research points to how when you assume this reality, and you tie into it the feelings that you would feel, gratitude, love, um, and you're reprogramming your brain to act as if it's in that moment. Your brain doesn't have the ability to distinguish between this being a reality that is existing or this being a reality that's manufactured. And so you're training your brain to exist in a new space, which as a result brings that new space to you. Now, that's not my field of expertise, but I did pull from his research in having a better understanding of how to help people rewire their brain when it comes to money.
Mm-hmm.
And so, to your question, how do I feel about the scarcity mindset? I think that it has been weaponized in language to promote product sales. People don't choose a scarcity mindset. People exist in scarcity because environments were created for them to exist in scarcity. It's manufactured.
Uh-huh.
And so in that either material scarcity, like this is my real world, I don't have access to food, I don't have access to water, I don't have access to housing, and the psychological scarcity that says I am in a threatened state, and so I need to react to this by fighting, fleeing, freezing, or fawning. That is what the scarcity mindset is actually speaking to.
Do you think that the imposter syndrome and the scarcity mindset are linked at all? Because as you're speaking, I'm thinking about knowing people that scarcity in terms of maybe their ability to get new employment, or maybe not necessarily funds, but they have scarcity in other ways. And I kind of then think about the imposter syndrome, where people feel like they're doing something, but they're not really there. They're not really the
Qualified,
person.
yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm just thinking, if there's a connection there. I feel like you would know more about this than me. So I just wondering if that was anything.
So I've experienced what we what we refer to as imposter syndrome, and sometimes
Mhm.
I still do, right? Like when I stop and look around at the things that I've been able to accomplish, in particularly over the last 5 years, as an entrepreneur, right? Like I've not held employment in almost 5 years now. Sometimes I'm amazed. I'm like, how am I doing this right now?
Yeah.
And the discomfort that comes with the fluctuating seasons of entrepreneurship by
Right.
way of revenue generation and income can tug on those levers even more so.
Hmm.
But I think imposter syndrome is very similar to to your point, to like the scarcity mindset, in that is a reaction to a manufactured reality.
Yeah.
Because who said that you're not qualified,
Right.
right? Or who said that you need this to be qualified? This being any number of credentials, designations, whatever, right? And so people often will shrink themselves and what it is that they're capable of based off of their measurement of somebody else's success, or the
Hmm.
perception of somebody else's success. And because they're measuring what it is that they're capable of based off of the perception of somebody else's success, if that success is real or manufactured, it doesn't matter, right? Because again, our brain doesn't have the ability to distinguish. They may feel smaller because they're not acknowledging that what it is that they have accomplished. And sometimes survival is the accomplishment, right?
Hmm. Right.
That's what makes them feel smaller, because it doesn't fit into the box that somebody else is saying you need to fit into. And so
Hmm.
I've had a very unconventional path in the space of financial therapy. Again, as I shared with you, like I was very adamant about not becoming a financial planner, but the CFP mark is considered, by and large, like the top of the top.
Can I ask, though, to back up a little bit, why you didn't want to be a financial planner? Like, what was the
Yeah.
moment where you're like, I don't like this. I want to go this way.
So I had a bad experience with a financial planner.
Mm. Okay, that makes sense then. Yes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and let me give more context, because it wasn't a
Hmm.
financial planner; it was a financial advisor, and I didn't know the difference.
Hmm.
So I thought that financial planners were financial advisors who sold like some kind of security, stock, bond,
Hmm.
ETF, whatever. I had an experience with a financial advisor who sold these items. Because I worked in banking, I was qualified for these services for free, and I decided that I wanted to pursue and take advantage of them.
Right.
The individual who I pursued, um, because it was going to be a free service, did not greet me with the same level of enthusiasm or care that they greeted the clients that they recognized would be a paying client, and instead offered me services that would result in their commission. And so because I was
Terrible.
dismissed, and because I was
Hmm.
like, it wasn't need based, it was just kind of like,
Hmm.
oh, this was going to get me money if you decide you want to move forward. I was like,
Right.
absolutely not. Like, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to sell.
Hmm.
I want to guide.
Hmm.
And so as I started to embark on the path of coaching, and I was like, oh, this feels like a better thing. Like I'm not selling, I don't have to get licensed, and all the things. I learned about the difference in segmentation of financial professionals who can sell products and services. And now I have the greatest respect for CFPs. Although there is a point of contention around like some of their like commission models, like there's a lot
Right.
of conversation around AUM and stuff like that.
Hmm.
But great respect for CFPs, and I know many CFPs who are also financial therapists, or who are also trained in financial therapy.
Right. Are your services available virtually, or is it all in person, or how does your clientele work with you?
So it's shifted over the years.
Hmm.
When I started, I was definitely one-on-one, working business to consumer. Now I find that my zone of genius exists in working with organizations that have teams who work customer facing. And so I support community organizations around leadership development or professional development, financial organizations, nonprofit, health and wellness organizations by providing their staff with trauma responsive training around financial education. And then those individuals would go out and engage with the community. So I just got back actually from doing a full day training in Milwaukee for a group of financial counselors and financial adjacent professionals. So that could
Mhm.
be real estate professionals or foreclosure counselors, or there were a couple of people from the credit union, CRA,
Mhm.
I forget the title, but that work with the community. And so in these settings, what I find is that not only do the service providers experience this aha moment breakthrough in terms of how they can engage with their clients, but they're also healing themselves in the process because they're becoming aware of where the roadblocks exist in their own experiences with money and how they may be projecting the hurt that they've experienced onto
Mm.
the people that they're working with.
So it's almost like a train the trainer
That's
kind of.
100. That's exactly what it is.
That's exactly what it is. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Um, wow. So hopefully, hopefully we get some you in front of some people that could really use that service because I feel like that's so needed. We do a lot of work with the United Way and Habitat for Humanity, Junior Achievement, and credit unions, which I really feel are the lifeblood of communities sometimes regarding personal finance. So I think that's wonderful, really needed. And so, what's next for you? What's where's your path taking you? What's going? What's next?
Into another book. So I've written or have been a part of 5 books so far. Last November, I signed a deal with Wiley. So this will be my first traditionally published book. It is due for release in November of this year, called Overcoming Financial Trauma. It is available everywhere books are sold right now for pre-order.
Mm.
But in talking about the way that I work with organizations, my goal is to be able to offer the book as a supplemental resource to the workshops that I provide for these organizations.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. Well, congratulations on that and being published by Wiley. It's so great.
Thank
All right.
you.
So I always end our coffee podcast with this question. If you could have dinner with any three people, living or dead, who would they be and why?
Oh, awesome. So right now I'm reading Toni Morrison and James Baldwin. So I would absolutely pick those two because I want to get a better understanding of like their process as writers.
Mhm.
So even though this will be my 6th book, this will be my 3rd full length, just me writing books. So like I've contributed to other books. I think like after this book, I want to get into like writing novels. Like I don't want to
Oh.
just be like the nonfiction self-help like finance guy.
Mhm.
And so, one of the things that I love about Baldwin specifically is that he was so versatile in his works. So he can write nonfiction, but he can also write cultural critique and essays and tie all of these things together without like diluting his brand, if that's such a thing, or having to develop a pen name to say, hey, let me segment this out because
Right.
I'm associated with this, right?
Yeah.
And Toni Morrison, she's just a very strong writer. Just phenomenal, phenomenal, phenomenal work. And then the last person will be my grandfather. My grandfather has had a profound impact on me
Mhm.
as a human being, my teaching style, my passion for education. My grandfather passed away in 2015, so it's been 10 years now without him. But I talk about him quite a lot in the book that I just referenced. I talk about him a lot all the time, but I talk about him a lot in the book that I just referenced, and realizing that so many of the things that he taught me at a young age are like coming to the surface now. And I think over the last 10 years, I've accomplished so many things that I just wish I could be like, did you see this? Did you hear about this? Like, oh, I'll tell you about this. So that's like my feel good. Like, I would love to, if it was dinner one time and I could just talk to him for an hour, that would be great.
Yeah. Grandparents are so important, right? Yeah.
Yes,
So
definitely.
tell us, how can people get in touch with you? Do you have a website? What's your preferred way for people to reach out to you?
Yeah, I definitely have a website. So my website is my name, rahkimsabree.com. From there, you can there's options for you to email me. My Substack is up there, so you can join my
Mhm.
newsletter. My book is not up there yet, but it will be. Um, you can book me as a speaker. I mean, there's so many avenues to engage with me through my website. So that's like the place that I would point people to.
Mhm.
And then, of course, I'm going to be promoting my book hard. So, website to book is like the pipeline right now.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much. I just feel like this is such a phenomenal conversation. And I feel like you've given so much good advice that a lot of people will get a lot of knowledge out of it and kind of have an epiphany and realize maybe things about themselves that they didn't even think about before. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.